General market performance in the last week, we've seen Emmanuel Bourses speak, we've seen the ECB try to take action, everybody trying to help Greece out of its problems, trying to mitigate the problems that might come up in Italy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's, globally, and it's always good to start with a global trend, and I mean, there's still so much uncertainty around what's going to happen with the euro debt, the US debt, etc., etc. And, the trend that's been going on for the last, say, 6 months in Africa is just low volumes, It's difficult to judge performance on the back of that when it is such thin volumes. And in fact, last week, I think we had more indices up rather than down, but typically volumes very light still.
Let's start with the worst performers for a change. Egypt down 2.5%. Now, they're having a few issues post-revolution with just trying to find a permanent footing. It seems like the government in transition is not very steady. The public's not very happy with them. And we keep on seeing political machinations, cabinet reshuffles and the like. What bearing does that have on the market?
Well, as we know, investors don't like uncertainty. And you're right. I mean, we always knew when the whole revolution kicked off back in January, we knew there was going to be a lot of up and down. It's going to continue for a while yet. As I was saying, that investors do not like the uncertainty, and last week there were more protests, and in an effort to appease the protesters, the Prime Minister did the reshuffling, like you said, but that really didn't seem to help. The other incident, obviously the Prime Minister was in hospital for high blood pressure overnight, and that doesn't help when people are uncertain.
Zim mining index down 1.3%. Is it still an issue of indigenization and investors needing further clarity on what kind of reforms are going to take place?
Very much so. The talks of the nationalisation are still ongoing, and it continues. I mean, if you look at mining, okay, remember there are only 4 stocks there, but across the index over the past 3 months, I believe all the names are down, and quite substantially. And we look at it, and there's nothing fundamental that would suggest that these names are going to rebound at any stage. So it's very difficult. I mean, Rio Zim last week was minus 9%, so it's really a sector that's taken absolute hammering.
But is it just the indigenization issues in Zimbabwe? Because some of the mining companies have had issues around settling their debts with banks that are illiquid. Some have had shareholder battles going on there as well.
Yeah, well, as I said, I mean, there's no specific reason to see it changing, but I think the core reason is the nationalisation talk and the indigenisation, like you're saying.
Okay. Kenya?
Well, you've just summed it up with Kenneth there. There's not much positive to say. We know that investors are just staying away, and it's down again today. We saw Equity Bank out this morning, which were good, and the name was up 2-odd%. We've got East African Breweries tomorrow, KCB later this week. So we're hoping that provides some sort of a drive. But, those are more micro fundamentals. If you look at the macro fundamentals, the weak shedding, the high inflation, all the factors you mentioned. Power outages. It's very difficult to find any sort of bid in that market.
Okay, moving back to North Africa, Morocco down a modest 0.4%, but that's still almost 0.5% there.
It is, but again, it's very difficult. This period of the year is typically the quiet summer period. Investors in Northern Hemisphere typically are very quiet, and Morocco really feels that. So we've seen an absence of investors across the board really in that market. So I think that's contributing to that.
What are we likely to see in Nigeria? It's neither a good performer nor a bad performer, but there's been a lot of fence sitting on the part of investors, and now we're seeing a lot of results coming through from the banks, better than expected. There's still that whole recapitalization process underway, but generally, what do you make of what's going on in Nigeria? Because at a reform and a regulatory level, so many things should be counting in their favor.
Absolutely, but I think it's more a global problem than a Nigeria problem. It's still one of our top picks. Again, very light volumes, but the results are coming out, and as you say, most of them are in line to better than expected, so there's no reason for it not to become more popular. We are seeing a lot of guys buying, but buyers are just being so patient, and in volumes like this, it's very difficult to be too aggressive when you're buying because you're actually just going to hurt the market. But saying that, we think there are the good buys, but I think it's a matter of people being selective and being stringent about what levels they're going to buy.
All right, let's go to the good news now. Proper Zambia up 3.5%. What's driving that index?
That was primarily driven by the listing of the first quantum minerals depository receipts, which listed on Wednesday last week. Those were up 55% for the week. They closed over 3,000 kwacha. I can't remember the exact number, but that was really driven up 55% for literally 2 days.
BRVM, the stock exchange, this amalgam in the CFA zone in West Africa, we do see a major company, a telecoms company from Senegal, and a lot of agro-processing firms there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Sonatel, obviously the name you're referring to there, that traded slightly up, so that obviously gave the market some sort of buoyancy because that's half the market. But rubber is one of the sectors that we like and we believe is fundamentally undervalued. And that obviously relates to agro processing. So we saw some of those names, SAF CI and Palm CI, and a couple of other smaller names which rallied above 10%. So really it was a sector that drove the market last week.
All right. Tunisia up 2.5%. Anything?
No, nothing much to report there. It was just that market's also been a bit up and down.
Okay. Botswana, we never really talk about Botswana, but it's been said here notable trades in Fern Mart and Sefalala.
Yes, now those are names that obviously we don't trade a lot of. They're not very liquid names. I mean, typically when you talk about Botswana, you talk about Leshego, which is still the most active. In fact, today traded at 185, which is a bit of a rally from where it's traded over the last few months at 180. But the others, there were some trades and they both traded slightly up, so that was kind of creating the obviously rally, as you saw in that market.
Okay, and what's happening here regarding Namibia and South Africa, because the two tend to reinforce each other, or Namibia tracks South Africa? They
do very much so. I mean, there are obviously a number of cross-listed names, but typically they track each other, and then they also track global indices. Yeah. And we were talking earlier about the global uncertainty, and it seemed like last week was one of the positive weeks.
Yeah, okay. Always great having you, Mike Barnes, who's head of trading at Securities Africa.